What's going on, guys? Welcome to your 36th Android tutorial, again with me, Travis, of my Bringback. And quickly, just to talk about how we drew this bitmap to the canvas, because it's a little bit different than what we've done before. And I realized I didn't really explain it in the last tutorial too well, why we're using rectangles and all this business. What's up with that? Basically, again, this first rectangle is going to define what we want to cut out of our sprite sheet. So what I did, for example, before this was 0, 0, and we drew our whole bitmap to the screen, I changed it to be 100, 100. So basically that's going to cut in about halfway through, and then the bottom, or it's going to start about in the middle, and then it's going to go to the width and down, the height as well. So that's what's going to be displayed. Now, of that section that we cut out, we can also scale that up and down, make it larger or smaller according to however big we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to say we want it from our X value and our Y value. So this is going to draw the top left corner to our canvas at the X value and the Y value. Currently it's set to 0, 0 at the beginning, and then we're going to go over to the right and down. We're going to scale it according to the width. So again, this would be 256, and the height, so 256 down as well. So basically what I did, I changed this 100 to 100 just for example, and as you can not see, cool, let me run this again. So as you can see, it's cut off a lot of our picture, but it's also scaled that picture up. So that's kind of what those two rectangles are and why we use this method of the draw bitmap, and we'll get into that a little bit later, more in depth when we're actually cutting out our sprite sheet, how we want to cut it out. But now what we want to do is we want to have this square bounce off the corners and basically walk around the edge of our screen here. So I'm going to change this back to be 0, 0. And all we're going to do is within this draw method, again we're in our sprite class here, within this draw method we're going to create a new method called update, which is a pretty standard kind of method when you're working with animation and sprite. So we're going to create this method called update, and this method is going to get called every time our draw method is going to get called. And again, our draw method is going to get called all the time because this method gets called within our loop over on our view class, over on our surface view example class. Again, because we're in this thread here and it keeps calling this draw method, which calls this method here, which calls our sprite draw method. So it's going to be called consistently. And all we're going to do is, for example, we can say our X position is equal to X plus our X speed, but we can also just do it the shorthand way, plus equal X speed. So now our X value is going to be basically whatever our X value is plus whatever speed we want to add to it. So it's going to add 5 each time it calls this update method. And then we're also going to set up a Y value to be something like this. And if we ran it right now, it'd still be pretty much the same because it wouldn't be moving, and that's because I set up this, I wasn't intending to do the sprite and sprite animation, so I kind of set up our surface view example class not the best way. So what's happening now is every time this run method gets called, it's creating a new sprite, which within our sprite class it sets our X and Y values to be 0, so it's never actually going to move because these are always going to be called, and it's always going to reset the X and Y values to be 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to surround this with the if statement and a Boolean value within our run method, kind of like we did here to check if our surface was valid. So I'm going to scroll up to our view class here, and we're just again going to set up a new value. I'm going to copy this here, and we're going to say sprite loaded, and we're going to set this equal to be false to start out with, and because our sprite is not loaded, but the first time this gets called, we're going to set this trigger to be true. Hopefully I'm not moving too fast here. You guys can kind of mess around with the code before you put this in, and you can see how it just kind of stands still, and that's because again, well, I'll let you figure it out. I think I kind of already explained it. But there we go. So we set up this Boolean value, and we're just going to set up an if statement around our sprite creation. So we're going to say if sprite loaded, and we're going to set that within parentheses. And right now this would be false, so it would not even so it wouldn't even call this to even create, so we get an error. So what we're going to do is we're going to put an exclamation mark here. So we're going to say if this is equal to be false, which it is, then it's going to allow us to create a new sprite. And then all we're going to do is we're going to set our sprite loaded to be true. So I know I'm moving kind of fast here, but they're all kind of concepts we've already discussed. So let's just check this out, make sure it works, and we're going to jump back over into the sprite class as that's loading. So we're going to scroll down, go to our graphics class. As you can see, it moves off to the right. Now it's not bouncing off the screen or anything, it just keeps on going because, again, each time it loops, it's adding our x and our y speed, and our x speed is just +5 and our y speed 0, so it's always going to go off to the right. So now what we want to do is we kind of want to add some control to this update method. See if it bounces off the left wall, bounces off the right wall, bounces off the bottom, and then we'll adjust our x and our y speed accordingly. So the first method that we're going to do is we're going to try and make it bounce off of this wall and start going down, or once it hits this wall it's going to go down. So what we want to do is, again, our sprite is like this. For example, we want to get the width of our sprite, we also want to get the width of our canvas, and we also want to get the speed that it's going. So we can check if the width minus what our let me just type it out and then explain it. Hopefully you'll kind of understand this. If you guys are new to any kind of programming with graphics and stuff, it might be kind of confusing, but just look at it, test it, play around with it after the tutorial's done, and you'll kind of understand how these work. But we're going to say if the x value is is greater than our view, OV. Again, this is the canvas size, or our view that we're getting passed in within our constructor. We're going to say we're going to get the width minus the width of our bitmap minus the x speed. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set our x speed to be 0 because it hit that wall, and our y speed to be 5, so it starts going down. So again, all this is doing is this value is checking the width of our canvas minus the width of our bitmap, because again our bitmap's drawn at the top left corner, so if the right side hits we want to kind of adjust for the width of our bitmap, and then minus the actual speed that it's going, because again we don't want it to overshoot a little bit. So then all we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, we don't want it to go horizontally anymore, so we're going to change the x value to be 0, and we're going to set up the y value to be 5, so it's going to start heading down. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to check if it bounces off the bottom. So it's going to go over, bounce, and start heading down. It's pretty much the same concept, so we're just going to say if y is greater than the OV, or our view dot get height, minus the height value of our bitmap minus our y speed. Then what we're going to do, well, we're going to set our x speed to be equal to -5, so it's going to start going backwards, and our y speed to be 0. And then these last two are pretty easy, quite simple here. So now all we're going to do is we're going to say if, and this time we're going to do a little bit different, a little bit simpler here. So we're just going to say the x value plus the x speed is, if that is less than 0, we're going to set x to be equal to 0, because if it overshot, we want to readjust it so it's at 0, and we also want the x speed to be 0, and we also want the y speed to be -5. So hopefully you kind of understand that as well. Again, we're just readjusting if it overshot. Then we're just setting our x value to be 0 and our y value to be -5, so it's going to start going up our screen. And then lastly, we want to say if y plus, again, like y speed or something, or I'm sorry, plus y speed is less than 0 as well, we are going to set the y value equal to 0, the x speed equal to 5, and the y speed equal to be 0. So that'll shoot it off to the right again. And then after all these methods are called, that's when we do our updating of our position, our x and our y position. Save this and run it. And as you can see now, it somewhat bounces off the screen and it looks pretty close. As you can see, we could probably adjust this a little bit better, but you know, it works pretty well. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial. Again, we haven't actually broken down our sprite sheet into the individual pieces yet, but we can get to that later. Actually, we'll get to it in the next tutorial. So thanks again for watching, guys, and hope you enjoyed it. Hope you're learning a little bit. If you guys are still confused, just kind of mess around with these methods. Try and come up with some of your own to get them doing crazy patterns and stuff like that. But again, thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you have a good one.